Brought to you by ConcordiaTheology.org, bringing you resources that support the vigorous life of the mind in service of the gospel of Christ.
Welcome to Tangible, Theology Learned and Lived. We're exploring the ways in which theology permeates all aspects of life. Through conversations with faculty at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, we will challenge you to deepen your theology and live out your faith in Christ. I'm your producer and host, Jessica Bordelot. I'll talk with a variety of professors on a variety of topics, something different every episode, but all pointing to the intersection of faith and daily life. Because it's tangible, theology is learned and lived. Immigrants and refugees start a new life in a foreign culture. The challenges of such a transition can be overwhelming. Jesus brings hope, peace, and a new Christian community to welcome them. How can we be a part of that? How can we be a part of bringing God's love in Christ to our new neighbors? Here to discuss is the Rev Jeff Thormodson. Rev Thormodson is the Assistant Director of the Ethnic Immigrant Institute of Theology, the EIIT program, here at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. He is the Assistant Director of Vicarage and Deaconess Internships. He also assists the oversight of the Cross-Cultural Ministry Center vicarages from Concordia University, Irvine, California. He is the Executive Director of the Lutheran Society of Missiology. Rev Thormodson spent 8 years in Russia, where he started 17 churches and 5 major world relief projects, including homeless shelters and children's shelters that are still serving the people of Russia today. Rev Thormodson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jessica. It's good to be here.
You've spent much of your ministry working cross-culturally. What is your motivation for that kind of work?
Basically, it's where the Lord has placed me. When I graduated in 1995 from Concordia Seminary and was first placed overseas as a missionary, it was an exciting time because Russia was just opening up. And it seemed to fit how the Lord had gifted me for doing ministry. I just fell in love with the Russian people and cross-cultural ministry. And starting churches was something that excited me, and also helping them to develop in their faith. And so that was how it all began. And when I came back after 8 years, I came to Concordia Seminary to get an STM, and the EIIT program had opened up that very year. Also, the evangelism module had opened up, and so they plugged me right in, and I've been doing it ever since 2004.
So your love for cross-cultural ministry continued even here in the U.S. with the Ethnic Immigrant Institute of Theology.
Oh, it was a fabulous opportunity. I mean, I had experienced being an immigrant in Russia, and then to come here and then to help immigrants who were here, who were not only Christians but had Christian congregations and wanted to become Lutheran, was just a joyful service to the church. I mean, it was really just something I have a lot of passion about, and I learned to enjoy it. And the more that I did it, the better I got at it. I could see more problems and more opportunities, and so it's just something that I've worked for 21 years here in helping the church.
Tell me more about that program, the EIIT program.
The EIIT program is specifically designed to address the situation that was, which was all over our country back at the turn of the century. Or in the 90s, we had a lot of immigrants who were coming to this country. And of all of those immigrants, about half of them were Christian. And so as Christians, they would come to this country and they would gather together and they would start having worship services or Bible studies or gathering in homes, and they would be speaking in Amharic or Nuer or Dinka or Vietnamese and all of these other languages, but they were worshiping. And as Christians, they often sought out other congregations. One of my things I did for the EIT program was I go and visit the students on site, and I get to see what their ministry was about and meet their pastors. And more than one pastor often said that it was the student, the leader of this congregation, who knocked on their door and introduced themselves and asked if it would be okay if, to get to know each other, but also they would need a place to have worship and fellowship. And so it was almost that the immigrants were coming to us looking for opportunities on how to worship. And so EIIT happened at that moment in history. There had been things that were leading up to it, but the program started because all of these immigrants were coming to the United States. They didn't have enough academic or enough English proficiency to go through any of the other programs, but they were already preaching and teaching, and we're looking for how do we closer connect. And so the program was really designed to connect with the immigrants communities that were surrounding our congregations and the leaders in those congregations and bring them into fellowship with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Mm-hmm. What different ethnic groups have you seen communities gather around?
There are a variety of, there are different tribes in the Nuer. There's the Nuer, the Sudanese. So in the Sudanese, there's the Nuer, the Dinka, and I think 2 or 3 others that we've actually worked with. We've worked with Vietnamese. We've worked with the Hmong. We had a Russian in the program for a while. Congolese, Guyanese, Liberian, Tanzanian, Korean, Chinese. The list just goes on and
wow.
on. So
wow.
At one point, I know there was 13 different ethnic groups that we've been working with, including Native American, and also we consider the deaf culture as a cross-cultural outreach because they're using interpretation for those types of things. So they're also part of the EIT program. Over the years, we've had over 100 graduates from the program.
Now, that program doesn't give a master's degree, correct?
It's a 4-year degree specifically designed to help men and women to become pastors and deaconesses in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. It's important to realize, I think, that unlike most of the seminary students that come to our programs, regardless if it's SMP or the residential route or RAR, that EIIT students are already serving in congregations, but they're also working full-time in jobs. Many of them are in entrance-level type positions. Some have a little better jobs. A few have actually professional jobs, but they are working full-time. And so the program is designed to help them with their theological training, with their pastoral and deaconess formation over a period of 4 years. The ministry that they're doing is actually very similar to what they're doing when they began. And so this is not a degreed program where they will suddenly graduate and get a salary and become full-time ministries somehow. It's designed to help not become a financial burden to them, but to give them the theological training and the experience and the guidance from their pastor and from the program and from the seminary so that they fully understand what it means to be Lutheran, what it means to teach from the scriptures, to be confessional in how they are teaching, to be biblical in how they're teaching, but also to be contextually appropriate in what they're teaching and how they do pastoral practice. And so the whole program is designed to help them in their pastoral formation, but it ends in a certificate. It's designed specifically for immigrants whose English is not their first language. And so the language of the curriculum has to be a little simpler to help them understand and to develop their theological understanding. But it doesn't mean, just because the language is a little simpler, doesn't mean that the theology isn't just as deep. We spend a lot of time helping them to understand the depths of Lutheran theology, what the Bible teaches, and the mentor, who is usually the pastor in the congregation where the immigrant congregation is also meeting, is working side by side with them for 4 years to guide and help form them into pastors and deaconesses.
Okay, I see. So these are men and women already serving in a church with a pastor who want more training, who want to deepen their theology, be formed as a church worker. So this is just equipping people who are already serving.
They are serving, but they're not yet ordained within within the LCMS. When a student starts in EIIT in year 1, it is clear that many of them learned their theology from, like in the refugee camps, from a missionary or they have evangelical roots, and they were with other denominations on their path coming to America, and those types of things. And one thing I have discovered is that the students, as they become exposed to the Lutheran theology and to our teachings and our doctrine and our biblical understanding, is that they are just wowed. They are really become impressed with the depth of our theology, and there's a transformation in how they understand the gospel, how they understand what it means to be a pastor or deaconess from year one as they go through the program until they get to year 4. There really is quite a significant difference in how they understand what it means to be Lutheran, what it means to be a confessional pastor or deaconess in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And so the program is really effective at helping them see not just be a pastor like they what they were before they became an EIT, but to really help them and form them into the standard and the level that we have for the seminary and the LCMS.
What are the benefits of training these men and women while they are serving where they already are, instead of having them come to St. Louis for a few years and train them?
It really isn't practical, nor is it really a good idea to bring them to a full-time program, in part because they are all already connected to a community. And so if you have a Sudanese community where they are already leading, each EIIT candidate or applicant or student in the program represents a network of people that they're connected to. They have been preaching and teaching and working with a group of people that is their congregation for many years, and these relationships are in place. And so if you take the leader from that congregation and bring them to the seminary, after 4 years when they would go back, there would be nothing there. Immigrants tend to move. We actually had one student that was in Memphis who the Sudanese congregation was there, and a meatpacking plant opened up in Nebraska. The entire all the Sudanese members moved, leaving this lone vicar at the congregation to finish up his vicarage. And when he finished, he then moved up, and it was like 18 months later or 2 years later, all of the structures had changed, and he never got ordained because the pastoral role was already filled. And so the idea of bringing immigrants to the seminary and then trying to re-embed them in their communities simply doesn't work. But what works is if we train them in place, it helps the congregation continues to grow, and it develops the second generation, which is also a huge goal for the program. So if we can reach the first generation through the EIIT program, through the immigrant pastors and deaconesses are there, they were raised up in the faith, they are able to teach it to their children well. And the second generation, which actually grows up in America, they were born here and they've gone to our elementary and our high schools, and now they're going to our colleges, have an introduction to the faith. Now that is a challenge that is going on today, as most of the EIT communities are working on how do we keep our children in the faith and working through it. But it's the second generation that is always the bridge, because they can work in the first generation and the third generation when they come along. They are the cross-cultural bridge that we are trying to develop. And we have had some second generation enter the seminary. And so it is working, but it's a long-range process. Most of the students that I first visited 20 years ago or so have children in college. And so they're telling me about their sons and daughters that are in college, or they're getting married and now they have grandchildren. And so the time has come for the third generation to actually be brought up in the church. And so the goal of EIIT is to really connect with that first generation. If you think about your typical congregation in the United States, they really don't have connections to the immigrants that are around them, or not natural ones. But if you connect with the leader of a congregation, or if you connect with a leader from the immigrant group, they suddenly become a bridge and bring the whole network into the fellowship hall where they start worshiping, and relationships begin to happen. And as they begin to happen, friendships are beginning to be made, and there are several situations where the youth from the immigrant group will then join the English-speaking youth group, and it does revitalize the church.
How do these men and women get connected? Is it online? Do they come on campus ever? Do pastors go out there to train them?
Generally, there is some sort of story where the pastor and the immigrant leader met, and they've developed a friendship. Some of these friendships have been, for 5 or 7 or 10 years, as they continually coach them and they bring them closer to the gospel, and they've been working with them, and it just becomes a time to send them to the EIT program. The EIT program is well known among the districts, and so it's not necessarily that we're going to recruit heavily. It's that when they're in the situation, they learn about the EIT program and they come to us. In fact, I just got a call yesterday from a student who's going to become visiting here from his pastor, who is a graduate from here. So generally speaking, our graduates know about the program, and when they have that opportunity, they connect them with Concordia Seminary.
I see. So there's a close relationship with the pastor in that ethnic group and these emerging leaders, and then he partners with the seminary to disciple them.
Absolutely. The best recruitment, or in a sense, the best person to decide who should be an EIT is actually the pastor who's working with the local church leader in his congregation or near his congregation. And so as he recognizes pastoral qualities or diaconal qualities, deaconess qualities, he is the one who eventually brings the idea and then introduces them and shows them how to apply online.
Can you share a story of a pastor who saw a young leader and wanted to connect them to this training?
One of the ones that's been written about in several places is Benediction Lutheran Church in Milwaukee, where Don Hogard is. And he's written this history in a number of places. But when I did the first visit, the congregation, he tells me how the congregation was struggling. That he was in an urban area, the neighborhood was changing, and the people of the congregation were either getting older or they had moved out. And so it was, what are we here for, Lord? When he had his first of his EIT students come to him, because there were immigrants that were moving into the neighborhood.
From where?
Congolese.
Ah.
So he's from the Congo. And so they started to connect, and he put him in the EIT program, and he went through the program and eventually started a congregation within the congregation. So they had 2 languages going. They had English worship and they had Congolese worship. And then there was a Hmong student, a Hmong community that was there that he also connect. And so the Hmong started connecting, and then there was another one, another Congolese that started in a city that was just a little farther away. Because once an immigrant group like the Congolese or the Sudanese find out that there's this good thing in training, they share that throughout their social network. And then they also find ways of, what is this training? Can I also get it? And so we had another one there, and then we had another Hmong ministry that came a little farther from that. But all of them flowed out of this one congregation in Milwaukee. So they've had 4 EIT students that have gone through that area, and I believe they're working on a 5th.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But every place that I visit, there's always this backstory of how we came together, how the congregation came together, what the challenges are. But the program is such a blessing to the local congregation and then the immigrant congregation and actually providing them with quality pastoral formation and deaconess formation so that the congregation can have solid teaching. They can have administer the sacraments well, and the church just grows. As congregations get smaller and declining or aging out, or people are moving in those types of things, immigrants are moving into those areas, and there's a number of these immigrant groups that are merging with congregations and in a sense filling it in. We had one of my earliest experiences was in North Carolina, where the church actually built a new church, and then they rented the old church. They didn't tear it down. They rented the old church to a Vietnamese pastor, and it was filled. He absolutely filled it. I have another congregation where it was about to close, and suddenly they connected with a Eritrean congregation, and they're working to revitalize the congregation. And so there are a number of places where this is happening. And it's a marvelous opportunity, I think, for our church, because people are migrating everywhere. People move during their lifetimes. And so not all congregations are always going to be around the people that normally would attend it. We have to look at how to reach the new people. And many of those are immigrants. I don't think people realize, but 1 out of 7 people in the United States are immigrants or are from families of immigrants. And so the opportunity to connect with them in new ways is good.
So you've been the assistant director of the Ethnic Immigrant Institute of Theology, the EIIT program, here for a number of years, and you've met lots of men and women going into the ministry. Tell me more about some of the students that you've met.
One of the first students I met was, he was a Sudanese pastor that was working with a group. And what was marvelous about that, of meeting him and knowing him, is he actually taught me so much about the Sudanese culture and the challenges that men and women had when they came to this country. How Sudanese couples, newer couples, functioned in Sudan. South Sudan was much different than it was here. Who prepared the food, how money was handled, and all of those things. In Sudan, it was just an entirely different way of, the husband could provide the wife with everything she needed. And then they come to this country, suddenly they have credit cards, and it doesn't work in those types of things. But he taught me so much about the challenges for family life in this country, the challenges that come between the different Sudanese tribes. And my point is that I really learned a lot from him about the struggles, not only of becoming a pastor, not only of going through the academics, but about the cultural tensions that they are dealing with as immigrants in this country that usually you don't see. Mm-hmm. So that was a very insightful relationship for me, and very, very impactful as far as looking for and asking questions of the students to make sure that I was catching all of the things that were going on in their lives, and maybe perhaps that they didn't feel comfortable or didn't have enough trust to share. I've met students who believed that they would not write out their sermons because they thought somehow that was hypocritical. And so I've had to coach them in saying, well, you're in America now, and so it's not necessarily,
is what's authentic, and if you write it down, it's
right.
Fake.
It had to flow out of the heart, and so it was a long conversation over a few days where we were working on this, and he eventually did write out his sermons, but it was important to understand that was a very difficult thing for him. We had another student who just the white alb, he just saw that as a dress. Mm. He said, as a man, in my Native American culture, I cannot wear a dress. But it was, again, a cross-cultural insight that I gained from working with the students, from listening carefully to them, and that I learned of some of the things that they go through in those types of things. And so for me, that was something that some of the stories that I learned from the students. Recently, we just had, he was a speaker for our banquet, Dawit Boker and Aaron Putman come, and they're working out of Hayward, California at Good Shepherd. And he just tells a marvelous story of how the congregation had 4 different people groups. And so they were meeting in Spanish, they were meeting in English, they were meeting in Tigrinya, and they were meeting in Oromo. And the challenges that he had of trying to bring those together, so it wasn't 4 congregations, but it was actually 1 congregation.
That worship together?
That worship together. And again, I learned from him, and you can see it, is that first-generation ethnic immigrants will sacrifice for the sake of their children. And so he built on that, and these things don't happen quickly. They take a lot of time and a lot of coaching and just a lot of conversations with people. But eventually, 3 of the congregations decided to no longer worship in their native language, but that they would worship in English. And by worshiping in English, they were sacrificing that familiarity that they had with their culture so that their children could capture the faith and be part of the faith. And it's a very fruitful congregation. The Lord is blessing it well. And while the one congregation is not worshiping in English, they are the ones that prepare the food, so they always have fellowship and good food after every worship service. So
that's incredible.
It is. To see how the Lord is working in raising up not only immigrant leaders within the LCMS, but to see how it is being fruitful and how it is flourishing is just marvelous. And it is something to be encouraged and supported because the EIT program really does serve the church. It serves the needs of the immigrant communities that are gathering around our churches in a way that is tangible. I just used your word.
That's right.
and it makes a difference in the lives of the people that we are serving. One of the unique things about our students, especially among those from Africa, is once they have graduated from the program, they have an enthusiasm to share it with the people back home. And so the Sudanese, for example, and I think a number of the other groups, they raise money to go back to Sudan to plant churches, to teach the gospel. And so I'm always hearing about my students that are going back to Sudan or going back to Africa, and they have these conferences, and they're just doing marvelous things. And so the fruit of what EIT does domestically is also being shared internationally as they're going and sharing among their family members, basically. So these are the people that they know. They go home and they share the gospel. They share what they know, and many of them are planting churches. I think one organization to build a church building over there was like $5,000, and so they were raising funds, both. Like the women's group that was part of that, and then the church was, and so it's just fascinating to hear the stories about how they're going back to Ethiopia, to Congo, different places, and sharing the gospel through these conferences and those types of things.
So our listeners hear the ministry that's going on with EIIT, and it's pretty exciting, and they want to support it. What can we do?
I think the most important thing that people could do, besides supporting Concordia Seminary and the program itself, through prayers and through financial support and gifts and those types of things, is simply to be aware of it. That indeed the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod does have a program that works with immigrants who want to become Lutheran. And it's not so much they want to become Lutheran, but they want to become good pastors and church leaders. And we have a program that does that. I would encourage them to do some prayer, but also to do to have some conversation with them, and to learn more about, what they believe, teach, and confess, because many of them were brought up as Christians. One thing that fascinated me in EIIT is that many of them were raised in the church overseas. Many of their grandparents were pastors or leaders in the church. Some learned it. Became Christians in the refugee camps where the missionaries reached out to them. But they all bring together their cultural heritage when they came to America. And so their expression of worship, especially in some of the African and the Haitians, often include dancing. They dance the offering up, and they're just moving their bodies, and they just don't. They think if you just sit in the pew and you're not moving, you're actually being inauthentic. That they actually see that as something that is a problem. Why don't they care that Jesus, saved them? Why aren't they moving? Why is the excitement? And so those types of questions exist. But so don't be afraid of the immigrant experience. Or getting to know the Sudanese or the Nuer or the Congolese or whoever is in your neighborhood, whoever God has placed in your neighborhood, get to know them, connect with them, inviting them, being hospitable to them, that relationships start, and that's how the gospel begins to be spread. More often than not, they will have some understanding of the Christian faith, or they're already going to a church, but that is where the Holy Spirit works, and by becoming aware of the training that we have, it is just an opportunity to not only to help them become connected with our congregations, but it's to give them the life-saving gospel and to help them understand the sacraments well, to strengthen their faith. It's not a prosperity gospel. It's not a name it and claim it. It's not a guilt-ridden law oppressive type gospel. Once they actually see what it is that the scriptures teach, what it is that God gives us, what Christ accomplished for us on the cross. And by sharing that is what attracts them to more theological training, such as EIIT and the LCMS.
The final question on the show is always this: what do you want our listeners to remember?
I think it's important to remember that whenever you're doing mission work, and EIIT is mission work, that there's going to be things that are unfamiliar, but that God works through those things, and that each of us is His ambassador, His witness in sharing the gospel with whoever God puts around us. And remembering about EIIT that indeed we do have a program that can raise up leaders who speak Congolese, who speak Amharic, who speak Telugu, all of these other languages that none of us that grew up in this country really speak. And so it's a wonderful opportunity and a way of making disciples of all nations. And if God has placed an immigrant group in your community, it is the opportunity that we have to reach out and share the lovely gifts that God has given us with them too.
Wonderful. Thank you, Reverend Thormodson, for being on the show today. You can find more episodes of Tangible on all the major hosting apps, YouTube, and as always on our website, concordiatheology.org. We have a lot more free resources there, like Befriending Neighbors, a downloadable video curriculum that equips congregations to serve and empower immigrants. The videos are real-life stories of Lutheran volunteers working alongside immigrants in their community. Thanks to a generous grant, we are able to offer Befriending Neighbors for free. Use it with your congregation or just on your own to watch the videos because the stories are powerful. You can find Befriending Neighbors at concordiatheology.org under the tab Resources. If you'd like to see the show continue, you can subscribe for free, share, or leave a review. This impacts the search algorithm that helps others find us. I'm your producer and host, Jessica Bordolo. Join me next time when we talk about the intersection of theology and daily life, because it's tangible. Theology learned and lived.